Hello and welcome to Latika Takes, a podcast with me, Latika Berg. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. Well, this week's episode is a bit of a change of tune, and I have to say it's one of the most entertaining and fun podcasts I've done of late, maybe ever. So this comes to you from Washington, D.C., but a very particular spot in Washington, D.C. It's from Butterworths restaurant. So I've been in DC to cover the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's first bilateral meeting with US President Donald Trump at the White House for the Nightly. And you can see a lot of my work there at thenightly.com.au if you so please. You may also want to recap on maybe a little stoush I might have had with the US President about Ukraine. It's everywhere, no need to repeat it here, but if you want to look that up, you may. So, Butterworths. Now, anyone who is anyone in MAGA land finds themselves dining at Butterworths. So I was told about this restaurant late last year by a good friend who'd been across the pond, came back to London and said, look, the hangout is Butterworths, you have to go there. So a very good friend of this podcast and of Latika Takes, my Substack at www.latikaemberg.com, introduced me to Alex, who I actually already knew from Australian politics way, way, way back in the day. Somehow I had his number in my phone, just never put two and two together. Alex Butterworth is a former Liberal contestant, I suppose you could say, but a former Liberal Party person in Australia. So keep in mind, Liberal Party is centre-right. And he moved to the United States and last year came up with this idea to start an Australian-style, yes, you can hear me going cha-ching, Australian-style restaurant in DC. Because of the nature or the composition of his investors, which you will hear in this podcast, it then very quickly became the place where MAGA land goes to eat and drink and party. And we are not just talking MAGA as in MAGA supporters. This is a place where the Trump administration goes. You will hear some of the very high-profile guests who have gone. Has the president gone? Please listen to find out. And so I was introduced to Alex over dinner. I absolutely paid my own way, just in case anyone is wondering. Every single thing I've consumed in this restaurant I paid for. And as we were discussing over dinner, it became very clear to me that he has a really interesting story to tell, and the story of Butterworths itself is really interesting, and the balancing of their business model, how they balance in DC, clearly not a MAGA town, being the Trump hangout, and trying to get people through their door that just do not like this administration. In fact, not only do not like, viscerally hate it. I'm pretty sure I'm safe to say that this is his first podcast interview. And a big surprise to me was that Bart Hutchins, who's the head chef, an American, decided to join us for our chat. So this pretty much ticks all my boxes. We get to talk food, we get to talk politics, we get to talk the administration of the United States and how that's influencing politics, and particularly centre-right politics right around the world, which you know is a big interest subject of mine. And to top it all off, we even end up talking about what we might drink. I so hope you enjoy this episode. I began by asking Alex Butterworth, as the honorary Australian, to explain how Butterworths even began.
Sure thing, yes. So the moment of inspiration actually came at a restaurant in Melbourne and was the culmination of a range of things happening in my personal life. I'd always wanted to start my own business and had ideas about more boring ideas like property investment, shares, cryptocurrency, that kind of thing. But sitting in Melbourne, I'd been doing a lot of painting and expressing some of my artistic side, and was complaining to my friend at the time about the fact that DC, even though it's a global city, it has a similar sort of population to Melbourne, just doesn't have the food scene that Melbourne does. And you'll be familiar with the Melbourne Supper Club. I wanted to bring some of that Melbourne restaurant scene to Washington, D.C. This restaurant I was sitting in had local art on the walls for sale. I had this idea of putting up some of my own art. I've done a little bit of that, not for sale, but I wanted to do something that was a bit of an investment, but also something that was emotionally rewarding, inspiring, and would express my artistic side.
And to be clear, you have a day job?
Yes, absolutely. I'm an attorney at Uber, at Uber Eats specifically. Before that, back in Australia, I was a senior counsel at McDonald's. So I've been adjacent in the legal profession to the restaurant industry for a long time, but wanted to do something very different myself.
So, how did you come upon this site exactly? Be specific where we're sitting. Where exactly is Butterworths and its proximity to the White House and the Capitol?
Yes, we're sitting only a few blocks from the Capitol building. And, it really ties together my interest in politics. I was involved in politics back in Australia, and ties together that political interest with art, hospitality, food, interior design. But I came across a Canadian guy. He was a restaurant consultant here in Washington, D.C. We looked at a few sites around the city, and this one I fell in love with, partly the proximity to the capital and the opportunity for members of Congress and other political characters to come into the restaurant. But also, I really loved the building. It's a beautiful old building. There was already a lot of character to the place. It just needed a spruce up. We changed a lot of the light fittings, painted the walls, put up some wallpaper, really lent into the character. The previous venue was an oyster bar with a sort of seaside theme, and that seaside theme just didn't really translate to Capitol Hill.
So, was Congress your target market? Is that who you were deliberately hoping would come through these doors?
I expected that being so close to the Capitol, we would have political staffers, members of Congress, political groups, lobby groups, journalists coming in. But I think that restaurants often live or die on their quality, on their ability to attract, whether it's tourists or just local residents. And so going into it, I really had no expectations other than, yes, we will have a variety of different people coming in, and our proximity to the Capitol will bring in a political crowd. But what it has become since then has far exceeded those expectations.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Bart Hutchins,
Yes.
this is the most snobby question you are ever going to hear asked by an Australian. Have you been to Australia? Do you even know what sort of quality food a Melbourne supper club might be putting on?
I haven't been to Australia, but I hear constantly over and over again from great chefs from New York to Paris to London that Australia is doing extremely well in the restaurant world.
And how did you design your menu, knowing that the creative vision was a Melbourne supper club?
Yeah, I mean we talked about the Melbourne Supper Club a decent amount, and really the thing we shared and the thing that makes Australian food so good is the fresh product, right? The fresh produce, the meat that's grown there on that island. Like they're not importing their produce and their meat from hundreds of thousands of miles away. It's all relatively local, and that makes the food in Australia incredibly good. And so replicating that here in DC was super important to us. And so, almost every vegetable you've eaten here was grown within 100 miles, all the meats within 200 to 300 miles. And that care and that procurement process of the product, obviously it takes a lot of technique from there to the plate. But if you get that part right, the food's going to be good. All you have to do at that point is not mess it up.
Okay, how does the restaurateur, as in the investor, meet the chef? What was the battle off like? Did you have to take about 20 dishes off the menu? Talk us through how you came up with what's eventually on the menu that we see today. Who won out on any skirmishes, if any?
I'll go first. I think I would refer to it as trauma bonding. So opening a restaurant is just not an easy thing to do. And in DC in particular, it's very arduous. The permitting process and all of these things takes months, and things that should take 2 weeks take 4 weeks, and things that should take 4 weeks take 4 months. And so it's a scary process, right? You start with a certain budget, and by the end of it, you're sort of looking around like, hey, do we have any more money? How much longer can we wait before we actually start opening this thing? And so through that process, through the stress of building the place, actually getting it open, I think by the time we actually opened, Alex and I, it felt like we were on the same page about just about everything.
How long was that process?
So I signed the lease in February. This was with our consultant. And then Bart came in June or July.
Yeah.
And this was last year?
This was, yes, 2024. And look, partly I have my full-time job for legal reasons with my position as a visa holder. I can't be too active. I have to take a passive investor role. But I had a lot of faith in that Bart and I were on the same page with the vision of what we were trying to create. And while, I requested some tributes, I suppose, to Australian heritage.
Which were?
Well, when we opened, we had a full Aussie breakfast, and that was pretty good, but not on the menu anymore, and a deconstructed pavlova.
Okay, let's talk about how they became victim. What happened?
Oh, breakfast just doesn't work after COVID. Nobody seems to get out of their house before 10 a.m. So we've really pivoted towards more just doing lunch that happens to start at 11 as opposed to doing breakfast. I don't know if it's the ability to work from home. I don't know what it is, but the breakfast culture is sort of over. I possibly everybody's on Ozempic and not eating, but that's a whole different story.
Wait, have you actually seen an Ozempic effect?
Oh, it's absurd. It's absurd. Portion sizes. So I like to be generous because I'm a glutton
Because you're an American.
and I love to eat. And people are not finishing plates anymore. Oh, this is the most amazing thing I've ever eaten. This is delicious. You guys did such a great job. And I'll sort of be like, well, why didn't you finish it? And then they give you that look, and
So what happened to the pavlova?
The pavlova was an execution problem. We couldn't do it well enough, consistently enough to keep doing it. And if we can't do something well, I prefer not to do it. But it'll make a comeback. I can make it in the highest other level chef could make it, but people below that couldn't make it. So you couldn't sort of streamline the process. It's a particular dish that requires a lot of technique, and it's not just for anybody to make.
That is so interesting. We need a skilled visa working category for pavlova makers.
You do.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. We
See
could
if
get
we
some
can-
Australians over on that for a visa.
Yes, yeah. Some E3 visa holders with degrees in pavlova making.
Exactly. Okay, so talk to me about how the business model goes. We heard a lot, of course. We've seen President Trump say, no one, this was a dead city, this was a dead country, no one was going out in Washington, D.C., everyone's too scared. It's grossly overridden with crime. Was that true? And did it affect your business up until when Trump sends out the National Guard?
I think that our business has been an exception to the broader restaurant industry in Washington, D.C. And there are so many different factors: wage increases locally, food inflation, of course, rent increases in the city, and of course, crime and people just being willing to go out on the streets is another thing. Whether people were returning to the office post-COVID is another factor. And so the restaurant industry in Washington, D.C., with all of those different factors considered, I think is struggling. And we've been in a unique position where we're different from what is available in the rest of the city.
What makes you different?
Well, I think for a start, we are founded by a collection of people who aren't necessarily from Washington, D.C., and bring a wealth of experience from around the globe. You know, we have a group of investors and people involved who have traveled the world, have traveled the United States and seen the different types of restaurants that exist around the country and around the world. And we're bringing a lot of the best from around the world to the city, where I think some of the restaurant industry here is very local and very influenced by what's already happening in the city. And the city is, I think, subject to a lot of the sort of big box retail restaurants. There's a lot of chains here. And I think that it can be a little bit of a struggle to open something that's truly independent and unique. I mean, one feature that we do, it's a bit of a gimmick in this city, especially if you're on Capitol Hill, to have pictures of all the former presidents and portraits of the Capitol and of monuments around the city. We've deliberately steered away from that. You know, people who live in this city all the time and who are working here all the time kind of want an escape from that. And, you know, I have, as a personal thing, a portrait of the Queen up. We have our old late 1800s map of Australia, a lot of French influence, a lot of British influence in the art, but have deliberately steered away from the gimmicks and tried to create something really unique and curated. One thing I've kind of picked up from that you see a bit in Melbourne is I love antique collecting. And so the fact that we have a lot of antique furniture that's mismatched and that you just won't see anywhere else. The more I go around to other restaurants, the more I see the same Amazon items that have been purchased from the same suppliers, and antique items are one of a kind. And so we have these one of a kind items that you just won't see anywhere else.
Yeah, it is a real pleasure to walk in here. How do you, though, balance profitability? And firstly, can we just answer that question? Trump sending in the National Guard, did it make any difference to you or not? Sounds like it didn't really.
I would say like yes and no. So for example, there's a store right next to us, like wine and liquor store. that they were getting broken into like 3 or 4 times a month before the National Guard came, right? So that's not happening anymore. Did we have those exact same problems? No, but it's business has more or less stayed the same, but like the safety level has gone up. I guess the short answer is like it's too early to tell. Like crime is definitely down. Like that store hasn't been broken into in a long time. So how does that affect business in the long term? Like, do people feel safer going out or not? Is yet to be seen.
Okay. And how much were your startup costs? I mean, to create this unique sense, nothing here looks very cheap. Did you overextend? Just from the pure business model advice, if someone was doing this again, what would you recommend to them next time?
Yeah, I won't give any numbers, but I think we did it on a budget that would surprise people at how low it was. And part of that was thrifting antique furniture, collecting old plateware from charity stores and thrift stores around the city. So we were able to find really high quality items by just putting a bit of effort into finding the right pieces. And part of that brings this charm, the patina of these old items that you don't get when you go into a restaurant that's had a $5 million renovation and everything is brand new and shiny. One of the phrases I used when we were doing the renovations was, we want to feel like we've been here 100 years, even though we've only been open a couple of months. And when you bring in items that are a bit battered and used, then that brings that atmosphere that it's something that has lasted and that will last. And yeah, I think that obviously these items that we're finding have been around for a long time. They've stood the test of time, and we want to bring it into a place that hopefully will also stand the test of time.
Okay, so let's talk about when you start to go blockbuster. How is it that you become a MAGA hangout?
Oh boy. You want me to go on this? So we were open 2-3 months. One of our business partners, one of our investors, Raheem Kassam, was the editor of Breitbart London, super influential in Brexit, came to the States, was very influential with President Trump's campaign and a couple other things. And so naturally, when you open a restaurant, all the investors and even the staff, they invite their friends and sort of say, like, please come to this new restaurant. We're all terrified. We just spent all the money we have to open it. Please come. And he was better at it than all of us. Before we knew it, like the room was full of his friends. And there's this sort of scene vacuum that happened. So during the first Trump administration, the entire sort of conservative movement, such as it is, was hanging out at the Trump Hotel. They were there every night, literally every night. And that was the only hub for that activity. Obviously, President Trump doesn't have that hotel anymore. And so there was sort of a vacuum as the new administration started. He won the election a month after we opened. And so sort of all of them were looking for, what's that new place? Where are we going to go every night? Now that we're, all back in sort of the Department of Labor, the Department of, whatever it is, now that we're all back in DC, where are we going to go? And so through the sort of momentum that Raheem had built by inviting friends, and then through that vacuum needing to be filled, all of a sudden they were here every night. And we see a lot of repeat customers because of that.
And who's the most high profile administration or MAGA identity?
Well, I mean, that's a dangerous question because who is more senior? The Treasury Secretary, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General?
Right. The FBI director.
The FBI director, is Steve Bannon a more influential political figure?
I would argue he is.
Yeah. I mean, we've even had Nigel Farage, not that he's MAGA, but an influential
next Prime Minister.
The next Prime Minister of the UK, perhaps. Yeah. Even our own Australian Kevin Rudd.
What, Kevin Rudd has been here?
He has stopped in for lunch one time, yeah.
And was he hobnobbing with any MAGA types? Or?
I don't think so. It was just a quiet private lunch, but supporting an Australian-owned business, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so how good or bad is that for business? DC is not a MAGA town. Sure, MAGA is in power. How do you balance what looks to me like a very agnostic restaurant that's based on food and space? You turn it, or it becomes a political hotspot in one of the most polarized environments. How is that working for you?
Yeah. There's just a lot of noise right now, right? And so I think for your business, whether it's a restaurant or a new product or whatever it may be, to be successful, like you really need to tap into some tribalism no matter where you are. Because there's too many options right now. Like there's a million restaurants you can go to. There's a million pairs of socks that you could buy. And so whether or not you're capable of speaking to an audience and sort of doing a capture of that entire audience sort of can make or break you. What's really fortunate for us is that we've captured that audience in a really big way. But because it is, as you described it, sort of an agnostic restaurant and just objectively good, that's not the only audience we get, right? And so we're able to sort of reap the benefits of capturing the entirety of one audience and still being open to the rest of the public in a way that's been, like Alex mentioned earlier, like restaurants are not doing particularly well in DC after COVID. And like we're one of the few success stories of this year because of that exact phenomenon.
But it can't be all rosy. I mean, I've even had talks to people in the time I've been here. Would you go to Butterworths? Hell no. You know, it's a visceral reaction, for better or worse. I think you have become politically associated. So is this a cost-benefit game that you've weighed and thought, let's go all in?
I suppose so. But we have remained open to any guest. We're not here to exclude people of a different political persuasion. You know, we've had Senator Fetterman. I know we've had people who are former Bernie campaigners. We've had union officials. We've had people from overseas from political parties on the centre left. And so we still welcome anyone who really wants to come through the doors. And I think that the appeal of just having good food, a good atmosphere, good service, that transcends politics. And one of the greatest, compliments we received was a great review in the Washington Post from their food reviewer. And the tone of that was that there was an expectation around the reporting of this being a MAGA hotspot, but that the food, the atmosphere, and the service are of good quality, and that goes above and beyond politics. And, I've definitely have a lot of friends who are on the left of politics who are very happy to come here and have dinner with me, and who are often out there defending me and my restaurant to their friends, whether it's my hairdresser or, friends in the legal profession who just know me personally and know that regardless of their politics, anyone's welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
But you have had protesters.
We do. I mean, this is a phenomenon, and again, we're only a year old, so we're starting to be able to quantify things, but it's all still relatively new. At this point, we're so popular that on any given night, the room could pretty happily be 50 left, 50 right. And I think that's entirely appropriate.
It really is that mix?
It really is that mix. But the dividing line seems to me to be more, we do really well if sort of your IQ is below 80, and we do really well if your IQ is above 110. But if you're in that middle zone where politics are like the only thing that matters and you aren't capable of understanding what somebody else thinks or feels, then you really hate us, like in a really big way.
And I thought I was going to be the snobbiest person on this podcast.
No, you never outstomp me. But if you're capable of understanding that the MAGA thing is no longer just an insurgency, that they have serious people on their side of the aisle, right? They have a Treasury Secretary that might be one of the most intelligent we've had in decades. If that's sort of like, if you're like, I disagree with these people, but I understand what's happening, this place is very interesting to you because you want to know those people and you want to be like, what are they like? Like, what are they actually? And then they meet each other and nobody hates each other. And none of the right wingers are Nazis and none of the left wingers have blue hair and like want to kill puppies or whatever. Everybody's just.
I hear you, but you can't ignore that this is a very different sort of left-right divide that we've got.
Totally.
I mean, Alex, you would know this better than anyone. Australians just aren't kind of up for this sort of right-wing politics that has overtaken America. It's a different sort of allegiance that you stick your badge to when you're saying, I'm with the MAGA crowd.
Yes, but, keeping in mind that Australia's population would fit inside Florida and that Australia is a more homogenous, smaller country population-wise than the United States, and America has its own very unique history. It's a country very much founded on values more so than geography, and those values of freedom and individualism, whether it's free speech or Second Amendment rights, those things are deeply cultural here in a way that fundamentally makes their politics different. Even down to voluntary versus compulsory voting fundamentally changes the political landscape. It's a very different thing to have to activate people who really care to get out of their homes and actually go to the polls versus Australia, where everyone is forced to go to the polls whether they like it or not. And, you really have to play to the middle ground. And so politics is fundamentally different based on culture, based on population, and, based on institutional factors like compulsory voting.
You mentioned Kevin Rudd has been amongst your high-profile guests.
I don't like you either. I don't, and I probably never will.
What did you make of President Trump's treatment of Kevin Rudd based on your own experiences observing his advocacy of both the Australian community here through coming here to your restaurant, but also the Australian national interest? I thought the visit itself went very well last week.
Yeah, I think it was a perfect example of something that is ubiquitous in Australian culture, not so much here, but that Trump does very well, which is banter. And Australians love a bit of banter, and I think that that's how it played, at least to the Australian audience, from what I understand. You know, the way that it was discussed between the two of them afterwards, it was all very joking and fun. And I think that that's something that shows the strength of the relationship between the United States and Australia that transcends political parties, time, geography, culture, all other factors.
I mean, Trump has since come out and said again, when asked if all really was forgiven, as was reported by the Australian Prime Minister after that exchange, he said,
I think he said a long time ago something bad. When they say bad about me, I don't forget.
do you think that from your observations here in DC, Kevin Rudd should stay in the job for Australia or not?
Look, obviously that's a decision for Anthony Albanese, and my politics is on the Liberal Party side, so I would love for there to be a Liberal Party government in Australia and for them to appoint someone on the Liberal side of politics. I think that the centre-right in Australia would naturally have a better relationship with the current administration, but the fact that Trump, despite these sort of differences in politics, has still seemed to maintain a good relationship with Albanese, I think is a great example of how that relationship between the two countries really transcends politics, personalities, and time.
Well, that doesn't sound like a very good endorsement for Kevin Rudd. Okay, so you alluded to this. You were from the Liberal side of politics in Australia. You ran for pre-selection, right?
Yes.
When was this?
This was in 2012.
And what did that experience teach you about where the Liberal Party finds itself today?
Look, I think one of the difficulties that the Liberal Party is having in Australia is bringing in new blood and having a spine. Frankly, I think one of the things that Trump has shown to the rest of the world is that you can be on the conservative side of politics and have a backbone, stand for your principles, not just be a watered down version of what the left stand for. And I think that a younger generation of people on the centre-right believe in that, want that, are looking for that. Certainly when I was younger and involved in politics, one of my frustrations was the fact that conservatives almost seem to be apologetic for their politics. And so I think that bringing in new blood of younger, passionate conservatives and libertarians, as I describe myself, who really want to actually stand for an alternative and prosecute that alternative view of the country, that are willing to fight and even lose on principle. I think that's what the centre-right in Australia is missing at the moment, and that if a bit of that politics was brought in, that there would be a real contest of ideas in Australia that's missing at the moment.
I mean, that's so fascinating because I spent 2 months in Australia on that Australian election campaign earlier this year. Labor would argue Peter Dutton tried to do exactly that and import a little Donald Trump style into Australia, and it totally backfired. And the Liberal Party is now in the worst position it's ever been.
Of course, I think every centre-left or left-wing political party in the world is trying to tar their conservative opposition as being Trump-like. I think that plays well in local politics when Trump's politics is America first. So whether you're Canadian or Australian, being perceived to be Trump-like may come across as being somehow deferential to the United States. So I think that that is something that is thrown as an accusation, but frankly is no more than that. I think that, Dutton, he tried to prosecute the argument on nuclear power, but I think could have prosecuted that further. We're seeing the results of the Liberal Party's lack of willingness to prosecute the argument on industrial relations. Simply the fact that the gig economy seems to be headed for its end in Australia, I think is going to be devastating to the local economy. And so I think that there are a lot of real issues facing Australia that naturally fall to centre-right parties that are not being prosecuted. And so I'd go as far as to say that the fact that, Dutton could have prosecuted the argument further, he could have relied on values more, he could have even leaned into these accusations of being centre-right, but tried to steer away from them. And that just looks like a lack of courage, a lack of conviction. And that's what I think centre-right voters are really looking for.
Do you think Susan Lay's got it?
No.
Why?
Gosh, why? I mean, she, as far as I've seen, I couldn't even tell you what her top one policy is, far less the top three. And, we've seen the most successful politicians, not just in Australia, around the world, are able to, in short, punchy lines, describe three things that they're going to do when they get into government. I couldn't tell you one. Now, that said, I couldn't really tell you three things that Anthony Albanese wants to do, but you need someone who is willing to stand on their convictions, willing to stand for those principles, even if it takes multiple election cycles. We're seeing that with Nigel Farage in the UK. We saw that with Trump. I mean, the fact that people forget that he ran in the Republican primary, I think when Mitt Romney was successful, even after losing in 2020, he came back. Often the most successful politics in Australia are the people who will stick to their convictions and come back. Even Robert Menzies came back a second time as Prime Minister. John Howard was written off as a political failure and came back to be our second longest serving Prime Minister. Even in the UK, someone like Margaret Thatcher was written off, but it was her conviction that pulled through. We're seeing a bit of that with Nigel Farage, someone who's stayed the course on issues over and over despite being ridiculed, sidelined. And I think that that's something that trying to win and sacrifice your values in order to win is not a long-term winning strategy.
But there's a key difference. Farage and Trump are populists. Thatcher, Menzies, Howard, they were all kind of normal centre-right leaders to varying degrees about whether you consider them moderate or whatever, but they weren't populists. Are you saying you think a populist approach in Australia would work? I mean, we have a centrist electoral system.
Mm-hmm. I think no matter your point on the political spectrum, standing up for what you believe in resonates now. We're even seeing that with Mamdani in New York.
That's right.
Bernie Sanders even, AOC, people, regardless of their politics, are looking for politicians who are genuine, who stand for their values and principles regardless of the timing and the atmosphere. And they're looking for people who have shown that over a long period of time. And so there are, I think, too many politicians who are swaying in the wind and moving with the electoral tides and not willing to stand up on principle and conviction. And the electorate ultimately punishes them for that in the long term. It may create short-term gains in specific seats or specific contests, but over the broader political timeline, I don't think it's a equation for long-term political success.
Who is the most likely leader you see at the moment taking the centre-right in Australia back to electability?
Right now, obviously, we have to only look at people who are elected. So someone like Andrew Hastie seems to be someone who could achieve that. I think that someone like Pauline Hanson has been around for a long time and stuck to those convictions, but the centre-right in Australia is so fractured that she's not achieving a momentum and a collection of all of those centre-right votes the way that you're seeing with something like Reform in the UK. The Liberal Party's protest vote is being splintered among a range of different centre-right parties and not unifying around an alternative the way that you're seeing with Reform really taking the votes away from the Conservatives in the UK. There's no sort of character like a Nigel Farage or a Trump that's really rising up in Australia, but there are some people with that potential like Andrew Hastie.
And when restauranting is done in DC, do you want to run? Are you going to go home and try again?
Hopefully restauranting is never done. We intend this place will be open for 100 years and I will be long gone and this place will still be going.
Long may she reigns.
Yes. But, there's lots of people that I was involved in youth politics with who I think are carrying that torch. People like James Patterson. If he weren't a senator, he's probably someone I would be pushing for the leadership. My good friend Tom White, who ran in the seat of Curtin, someone I hope comes back to politics.
But you can't win unless people run and contest seats. So are you going to put your skin in the game or no? You're done?
I never say never, but I really love the United States and would love to stay here for the rest of my life. But, if circumstances change, I wouldn't rule it out. And, there's a lot of influence I can have just supporting my friends and the people that believe in the same things that I do back home.
Okay, let's go back to where we began, the food, because the food is absolutely exceptional, and I can attest to this. Have you had Donald Trump here? And if Donald Trump came, each of you, what would you now? He doesn't drink. So let's just, in a fantasy world, imagine Donald Trump comes with somebody who does have a drink. What would your menu recommendations be each?
Go for it.
Well, I mean, I've often said that I feel like this place is a little more Melania than Donald, and that the bone marrow and the martini Alex would be, I hope, a great fit for her.
I always forget that. That's a good one.
But, we also have Coca-Cola and a cheeseburger that Donald could have, although it's Mexican Coca-Cola, so I don't know that he would like that.
Wait, what is this Mexican Coca-Cola?
They still make it with real cane sugar as opposed to corn syrup.
Wait, they make Coca-Cola with corn syrup?
Yeah, the American one, yeah.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Yeah, it's not good.
So our version at least would appeal to RFK Jr.
Yes.
So maybe to Donald Trump by...
Trump hasn't been here, right?
Not yet.
No. It's a logistical thing with the Secret Service and whatnot that we got to figure out.
But he would come if he could.
I think so.
Okay, interesting. And head chef, what would you recommend?
Oh boy. I would, just like we do with the rest of our guests, I would sort of try to push the president out of his comfort zone. So I would love to see him start with the beet salad. I think he would love them if he gave him a chance. And then I would like to see him move on to the Carolina gold rice, which is like a risotto type fish. The rice is a heritage sort of American breed that was grown in South Carolina 200 years ago. And we stopped, due to industrialization, we actually stopped making it because it doesn't produce as quickly as some of the lesser grains of rice that you now see everywhere. And so we've worked with a mill down there that grows this particular grain of rice. So it's like in some ways a nationalist product, right? Like it is an American product that sort of speaks to our heritage. And I think him having an appreciation and understanding for that would be really cool.
Very nice. All right, team, you didn't recommend a drink. We'll finish this podcast and go have one. What are we going to have?
Oh, if President Trump did drink, I'd try to convince him to take a shot of Fernet with me.
What?
Fernet.
Fernet.
Oh, okay, this is what we tried.
With Tim, yes. It's a bit of a hospitality industry drink.
It's a bitter digestif. Traditionally, it's Italian. It's traditionally consumed sort of after dinner, but it's become a house favorite.
Okay, so this is your signature at Butterworths.
No. It is the signature of anybody who does this for a living.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Good luck at Butterworths, and I look forward to seeing what happens next for this restaurant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Latika Takes with me, Latika Burke. You can find my work at latikambirk.com and this podcast where you find all your podcasts. See you next time.